Welcome back to Karting Essentials presented by NKA and Point Karting.com. I'm Eric Gunderson, and today we're going to walk through how to install a chassis protection kit on this racing go-kart. Whether an experienced kart racer or relatively new to the sport, protecting the underside of your go-kart chassis and therefore protecting your investment is a crucial thing that all racers should consider doing when they're going out and racing their karts. And one of the best ways to do that is to have a chassis protection kit like this one, the Steel Chassis Protection Kit by PKT. Now, some chassis protection kits are made of plastic, some are a little bit cheaper than others, some have multiple pieces while others only have one or two, whereas this particular chassis protection kit actually has 3 pieces. So today we're going to walk through how to mount that on the underside of your go-kart. For demonstration purposes, I've got this kart on a vertical kart stand. You don't necessarily have to do that. You can do this on a kart stand. You can tilt it up on the edge of a table, something like that, depending on what you have. But this is going to make this significantly easier. Another thing I do recommend is taking some time to actually remove the fuel tank, as that's going to make a difference whether or not you potentially drill through the underside of it. Depending on your particular chassis, that can be something that you may want to consider to do as well. To install these chassis protection kits, you don't need a lot of equipment, but let's go ahead and walk through it. I've got a cordless drill here. You can also use a corded electric one if you want to. A drill bit index with some different drill bits in it. A 4mm T-handle or Allen, and then a ratcheting 10mm wrench. You don't need to have that ratcheting component, but it will make this a little bit faster. You can also use an impact gun with a 10mm socket if you really want to. Lastly, and most importantly, I'm going to use a Sharpie to mark where I'm going to drill my holes. The first step to really start mounting these on the actual go-kart is going to be to basically put them in place and just see how they fit up. So I've already done that on this chassis, and everything fits pretty well except for one thing. What I've noticed is here on the PKT kit, it fits really well around my front frame tube, and it's definitely going to protect the area that I want to, but I've got a slight gap here between the actual plate and my floor pan. So in this case, I'm going to use some rubber grommets to basically just space that out to get the spacing that I need. And I may need to use slightly longer conical head bolts. This is not an uncommon thing when mounting up a floor tray kit, but something that you want to do kind of first straight away just to figure out what kind of project you're walking into. The next thing is basically to put it in place, center it, and on a kit like this where we have very wide bolt spacing, we don't have to worry about this, but on some chassis protection kits, the bolt spacing is a little bit more narrow. We have to be cognizant of the steering shaft support on the other side and basically try to center it relative to that so that our bolts are okay and kind of going to clear on either side. And once we have it fairly centered and we're happy with where it is, we can take a Sharpie, and in this case I will dip this down just slightly so that I can mark my holes. And there you can see I've marked my holes. That's where I'm going to drill for my bolt holes for the top plate. I'm now going to do the same with the pieces on the side. So with the side pieces, this process is going to be very similar. Again, we're going to have our Sharpie and our side pieces, and these fit in what's called the waist area of the chassis. So as I fit this up, I can move it up or down. PKT has this really nice notch that fits around the floor tray bolts, and so that's a nice feature. One thing that I'm noticing here is my floor tray bolts are very worn, so I may want to replace these now that I have the opportunity before they get worn even more. And also I see the scraping on this particular chassis, rather than further along the frame tube, is a little bit higher up. In this particular case, I'm actually going to remove these bolts and utilize the mounting hardware on these floor tray protection kits to replace them and kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So with those bolts removed, now I can actually properly do my waist skid plates fit up. So I obviously will want to position this over the existing bolt hole, take my Sharpie, mark my locations, and just maybe put your Sharpie in there just to double check on the other side. You can see my mark there. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Again, in this particular kit, and in most kits, these side waist protection skid plates, those are going to be pretty much the same bolt pattern. So that is an advantage of these kind of universal kits. Now that I have all of my holes marked, it's time to actually drill through the holes, and then we'll be able to mount up our skid plates. So as a result, I've chosen a 9/32 drill bit, maybe a little bit larger, just double checking, comparing it to my Allen bolts here, which are about M5 in size. So just take your drill bit, make sure it's going in the right direction, and drill your holes. Again, make sure this is the time that you want to be careful to not have the fuel tank in the way. So this is on some particular chassis why I remove the fuel tank before I actually drill through, so that as you puncture through the floor tray, you don't drill up into your fuel tank, which is rare but can happen in more narrow waist chassis. Okay, now I've got my holes drilled, and it's time to actually go and mount up the chassis protection plates. So we're making a lot of progress here. If you have a situation where drilling through the floor tray, you end up with a little bit of metal burrs or something like that, just slightly rock your drill side to side to just clean up those burrs, or in worst case scenario, use a file or maybe a slightly larger drill bit to clean up those holes. So we've got these kind of rubberized or plastic grommets. We'll go ahead and insert our bolts through the top of the floor tray. And then I will take my rubber grommets and place them on the other side of the bolts. Next, I'm going to take my skid plate and actually insert it over the bolts. Take my washers, and almost all these kits, having these washers is important, even though they're small and you can drop them all the time. This is going to help distribute some of the load and the stress over these fairly thin floor pans and floor trays. They're only about an 1/8 inch thick aluminum. Now, as you tighten them down, you're going to find that sometimes on some kits like this one that wraps around the frame, you may meet some resistance. That's okay. What it's doing is it's just wrapping around the actual frame. So in that case, just keep on tightening until you get a nice flush finish. Last but not least, I'm going to put on my top plate here, and that is going to likely require, since I have to use these rubber grommets, to have slightly longer bolts. So I have my slightly longer conical head bolts here, and I'm going to pull apart the assembly that comes with the kit, and may need to go with these slightly longer bolts just to make everything fit really nicely. That's going to do it for this video, where we covered how to install a steel chassis plate protector kit on the underside of a racing go-kart. For Karting Essentials, NKA and Point Karting.com, I'm Eric Gunderson. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, give it a like, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment below. Let us know what we got right, let us know what else you'd like to see, and thanks for watching. For a more in-depth review of the steel chassis plate protector kit by PKT, check out our video right here.